The figure we now know as Baba Yaga emerges from the misty depths of prehistoric Slavic consciousness, her origins stretching back to a time when the written word had not yet captured the sacred narratives of Eastern European peoples. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Proto-Slavic communities of the 5th and 6th centuries AD possessed a rich oral tradition that preserved ancient mythological concepts through generations of storytelling, and within these traditions lay the seeds of what would eventually crystallize into the complex figure of the Witch of the Forest. Linguistic analysis reveals that the name Baba Yaga itself carries profound etymological weight. The word Baba, found across numerous Slavic languages, originally denoted not merely an old woman but specifically a female ancestor or grandmother figure possessed of supernatural knowledge. This term appears in Old Church Slavonic texts as early as the 9th century, though its usage in folk contexts predates Christian influence by several centuries. The second component, Yaga, presents a more complex etymological puzzle. Some scholars trace it to the Proto-Indo-European root meaning horror or evil, while others connect it to ancient Slavic words for illness or fury. However, the most compelling linguistic evidence points to connections with words meaning serpent or snake in several Slavic dialects, suggesting an ancient association with chthonic powers and earthbound deities. The earliest folk traditions that can be reconstructed from later sources reveal Baba Yaga as fundamentally different from her later fairy tale incarnations. In these primordial narratives, she appears as a figure of immense power dwelling at the boundaries of human comprehension. Her domain was not simply the forest, but the liminal spaces where the ordered world of human settlement met the chaotic realm of untamed nature. Archaeological discoveries from early Slavic settlements show evidence of ritual sites located at forest edges, often marked by carved wooden posts that bear striking resemblance to later descriptions of Baba Yaga's fence of bones. The connection between Baba Yaga and ancient earth goddesses becomes apparent when examining the broader context of pre-Christian Slavic religious practices. The early Slavs worshipped a pantheon of deities intimately connected to natural cycles, agricultural fertility, and the mysteries of death and rebirth. Among these divine figures, several female deities governed the earth's bounty and the passage between life and death. Mokosh, the Earth Mother Goddess, controlled the fertility of both land and women, while also serving as a guide for souls transitioning between worlds. The linguistic and functional parallels between these ancient goddesses and Baba Yaga suggest a direct evolutionary relationship. Evidence from burial sites across the early Slavic territories reveals ritual practices that illuminate Baba Yaga's ancient role as a death deity. Excavations in present-day Ukraine, Poland, and Western Russia have uncovered graves containing elderly women buried with iron tools, grinding stones, and animal bones arranged in specific patterns. These burial goods mirror the implements traditionally associated with Baba Yaga in later folklore: the mortar and pestle for grinding bones and herbs, the iron teeth for consuming the dead, and the chicken legs that carry her dwelling between worlds. The positioning of these graves at settlement boundaries reinforces the interpretation of these women as ritual specialists who mediated between the community of the living and the realm of the dead. The role of Baba Yaga as a liminal figure becomes even more pronounced when examined through the lens of ancient Slavic cosmology. The early Slavs conceived of the universe as consisting of multiple interconnected worlds separated by boundaries that could be crossed only under specific circumstances and with proper knowledge. The world of the living existed in constant tension with the realm of the dead, and the passage between these worlds required the intervention of specialized beings who possessed the power to traverse these dangerous thresholds. Baba Yaga's dwelling, consistently described as rotating on chicken legs and surrounded by a fence topped with human skulls, represents a physical manifestation of this liminal function. The chicken legs allow the house to turn away from visitors, symbolically closing the boundary between worlds, while the skulls serve as both warning and protection, marking the threshold as a place of power and danger. The iron teeth attributed to Baba Yaga in the earliest traditions served not merely as weapons, but as tools for consuming the spiritual essence of those who fail to properly navigate the boundary between life and death. The preservation of Baba Yaga's essential characteristics through centuries of cultural transformation demonstrates the remarkable resilience of oral tradition in Slavic societies. As Christianity spread through Eastern Europe from the 9th century onward, many ancient deities were either absorbed into Christian mythology as saints or demons, or driven underground into folk traditions. Baba Yaga's survival as a distinct mythological figure required her transformation from a potentially benevolent earth goddess into a more ambiguous character who could exist within a Christian worldview without directly challenging its fundamental tenets. The process of this transformation can be traced through variations in regional folklore collected during the 18th and 19th centuries. In some traditions, Baba Yaga retained clear connections to her ancient role as an earth deity, appearing as a figure who controlled the fertility of crops and the success of harvests. These versions often depicted her as dwelling in underground chambers or caves, emphasizing her connection to the earth itself. In other regional variants, her association with death became more prominent, with stories describing her as a collector of souls who weighed the moral worth of those who sought her aid. The oral traditions that preserve Baba Yaga's essence also maintained specific ritualistic elements that point to her ancient religious significance. The proper approach to her dwelling required knowledge of specific phrases and behaviours that echo pre-Christian religious practices. Visitors had to demonstrate respect for the natural world, show proper deference to ancestral wisdom, and prove their worthiness through acts of service or cleverness. These requirements reflect the ancient understanding that communication with divine or supernatural forces demanded careful preparation and adherence to established protocols. The geographical distribution of Baba Yaga stories across the Slavic world provides additional evidence for her ancient origins. Her tales appear in remarkably consistent forms, from the Baltic regions in the north to the Balkans in the south, and from the Czech lands in the west to the Russian steppes in the east. This widespread distribution suggests that her mythological significance predates the major migrations and cultural divisions that shaped medieval Slavic societies. The consistency of her core characteristics across such diverse linguistic and cultural groups indicates that her origins lie in the shared Proto-Slavic cultural matrix from which all later Slavic traditions emerged. The seasonal associations embedded in Baba Yaga folklore further illuminate her connections to ancient earth goddess traditions. Many stories place her activities at specific times of the agricultural year, particularly during the transitions between seasons when the boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the dead was believed to be most permeable. Her association with autumn, the time of harvest and preparation for winter's symbolic death, reflects her role as a mediator between the abundance of life and the necessity of death that ensures future renewal. The transformation of Baba Yaga from a potentially divine figure to a folkloric character also involved the preservation of ancient wisdom traditions within her stories. The tests and challenges she presents to visitors often require knowledge of traditional crafts, agricultural practices, and natural law that connected Slavic communities to their ancestral ways of life. Her role as both obstacle and aid to heroes reflects the ancient understanding that wisdom and power could only be obtained through proper relationship with the forces that govern the natural world. The physical manifestation of Baba Yaga represents one of the most distinctive and terrifying figures in all of world mythology, her appearance serving as a visual codex of ancient Slavic understanding about the intersection of life, death, and supernatural power. Her most notorious feature, the iron teeth, appears consistently across regional variations. From the earliest recorded folk tales through the most recent ethnographic collections, These teeth were not merely described as metal-like or strong, but specifically as forged iron, gleaming with the cold light of worked metal and capable of grinding through bone, wood, and stone with equal ease. The iron teeth served multiple functions beyond their obvious role as weapons of consumption. They represented the transformative power of metallurgy that had revolutionized Slavic society, while simultaneously connecting her to the chthonic forces that provided the raw materials for ironworking. The descriptions of these iron teeth vary in their specific details, but maintain consistent core characteristics across different regional traditions. Russian variants often describe them as black iron, filed to sharp points and set in gums that bled constantly, the blood serving to keep the metal from rusting. Ukrainian traditions frequently mention that the teeth could be heard grinding together when Baba Yaga was angry, creating sparks that could ignite dry grass or fallen leaves. Polish folklore sometimes describes the teeth as removable, allowing Baba Yaga to sharpen them on whetstones or replace damaged ones with freshly forged implements. The sound of these iron teeth became a crucial element in many tales, with their grinding or clicking serving as an auditory warning of her approach long before her physical form became visible. The skeletal nature of Baba Yaga's body represents another fundamental aspect of her physical manifestation, with her bony legs receiving particular attention in traditional descriptions. These legs were not simply thin or emaciated, but literally described as bones wrapped in minimal flesh, often with the bone structure clearly visible through translucent skin. The legs possessed supernatural strength despite their apparent fragility, capable of carrying her across vast distances at inhuman speeds. Many traditions describe the legs as disproportionately long, allowing her to stride across rivers and valleys in single steps, while others emphasize their ability to fold and unfold like the legs of a crane or stork, enabling her to compress her height when entering her dwelling or extend it when surveying her domain from great heights. Her overall physical form combined elements of extreme age with supernatural vitality, creating a paradoxical figure that embodied both decay and power. Traditional descriptions consistently portray her nose as enormously long and hooked, often reaching down to her chin or even extending beyond it. This nose was not merely large but possessed its own supernatural qualities. It could detect the scent of living humans from great distances, distinguish between the pure and the corrupt, and in some traditions could extend or contract at will to reach into hidden places or probe for information. The nose often appeared blue or grey in colour, suggesting both the pallor of death and the metallic hue of iron or lead. Her hair, when described, typically appears as wild, unkempt strands of grey or white that moved independently of any wind, sometimes described as having a life of its own. The hair could entangle victims, serve as additional limbs for grasping objects or manipulating her environment, and in some accounts, individual strands possessed the strength of iron wire. Her eyes received particular attention in traditional descriptions, often characterized as glowing red like coals or burning yellow like those of a predatory bird. These eyes possessed the ability to see through deceptions, peer into the souls of visitors, and in some traditions could project their vision across great distances to observe events in remote locations. The supernatural abilities attributed to Baba Yaga extend far beyond her fearsome physical appearance, with her mastery of flight through her iron-toothed mortar and pestle representing perhaps her most iconic power. The mortar itself was described as being forged from iron or carved from stone, large enough to accommodate her entire body while she crouched within it. The pestle served as both rudder and propulsion system, allowing her to steer through the air while grinding the very atmosphere to create the force needed for flight. Traditional accounts describe the sound of her aerial passage as a combination of grinding stone, rushing wind, and the screams of the spirits she had consumed, creating an auditory signature that could be heard for miles. The mechanics of this flight defied natural law in ways that emphasized her supernatural nature. She could ascend vertically from ground level to great heights in moments, hover motionlessly above specific locations for extended periods, and descend with such speed that her landing created craters in the earth. The mortar's flight path was often described as erratic and unpredictable, zigzagging through the air in patterns that suggested either madness or a form of supernatural intelligence beyond human comprehension. During flight, sparks would trail behind the mortar as the iron pestle ground against the stone interior, creating streams of light that could be seen even during daylight hours. Her control over natural elements manifested in numerous ways that demonstrated her connection to fundamental forces of the natural world. She possessed the ability to command winds, summoning gales that could strip leaves from trees, redirect the course of rivers, or create barriers of swirling air that prevented pursuit. Her relationship with fire extended beyond simple pyrokinesis to include mastery over different types of flame, the cold fire that provided light without heat, the consuming fire that could burn even stone and metal, and the spirit fire that could illuminate the true nature of objects and beings while leaving their physical forms untouched. Water responded to her will in ways that revealed her ancient connections to Earth Goddess traditions. She could cause springs to bubble up from dry ground, redirect the flow of established streams, and create fog so thick it became nearly solid, capable of supporting her weight or forming barriers that could not be penetrated by normal means. Her power over Earth allowed her to cause the ground to shift and change, creating hills and valleys, opening chasms that led to underground realms, and causing trees to uproot themselves and walk to new locations. The shape-shifting abilities attributed to Baba Yaga represent some of the most complex aspects of her supernatural nature, with her transformations often involving partial, rather than complete changes that created hybrid forms more terrifying than any single animal shape. Her most common avian transformation involved taking the form of a massive crow or raven, but descriptions consistently mention that she retained her iron teeth even in bird form, creating a creature that combined the mobility of flight with her signature destructive capability. In this form, her wings were often described as producing the sound of grinding metal when they flapped, and her cries could shatter glass or cause livestock to flee in terror. Her connection to forest creatures extended beyond simple transformation to include a form of spiritual kinship that allowed her to command and communicate with animals that shared her liminal nature. Wolves responded to her call not as a pack leader, but as a supernatural entity whose authority transcended normal animal hierarchies. Bears would emerge from hibernation at her summons, and even the smallest forest creatures, mice, insects, and spiders, could serve as her agents, carrying messages or gathering information across vast distances. The symbolic significance of Baba Yaga's physical attributes reveals layers of meaning that connect her appearance to fundamental concepts in Slavic cosmology and prehistoric European religious thought. Her iron teeth represent the transformative power of metallurgy, but they also symbolize the ability to consume and process the raw materials of existence, bones, flesh, and spirit, and transform them into new forms of energy and knowledge. The grinding action associated with these teeth mirrors the grinding of grain that sustained human life, creating a parallel between her consumption of the dead and the agricultural processes that fed the living. Her skeletal legs and overall emaciated appearance connect her to the concept of death, not as an ending but as a transformative process. The visibility of her bone structure through minimal flesh suggests a being who exists in the liminal space between life and death, having undergone the process of decay while retaining the animating force that allows for continued existence. This physical state represents the Slavic understanding of death as a transition rather than a termination, with Baba Yaga serving as a living example of consciousness that persists beyond the normal boundaries of mortal existence. The grotesque nature of her appearance serves multiple symbolic functions within the context of ancient Slavic religious thought. Her exaggerated features, the enormous nose, the wild hair, The disproportionate limbs mark her as a being that exists outside normal natural law, while simultaneously emphasizing her connection to primal forces that preceded the establishment of civilized order. The combination of human and non-human characteristics in her appearance reflects the ancient understanding that the most powerful supernatural beings occupied a middle ground between the familiar world of human experience and the alien realm of pure spiritual force. Her ability to inspire both terror and fascination through her appearance reflects the complex relationship between human consciousness and the forces that govern natural cycles. The revulsion her physical form typically provokes serves as a protective mechanism, warning potential victims of the danger she represents, while the magnetic quality that draws heroes and seekers to her dwelling suggests a recognition of the wisdom and power she embodies. This dual response mirrors the ancient Slavic understanding of death itself, as both the ultimate threat to individual existence and the necessary precondition for renewal and transformation. The iron elements in her physical description carry particular symbolic weight when considered in the context of early Slavic metallurgical traditions. Iron represented mastery over the raw materials of the earth, the ability to extract useful tools and weapons from seemingly worthless ore, and the power to reshape the environment according to human will. By incorporating iron into her very being, Baba Yaga embodied the supernatural equivalent of this transformative technology, possessing the ability to process the raw materials of existence, life force, spiritual energy, and accumulated experience, and reshape them according to her own mysterious purposes. The dwelling of Baba Yaga stands as perhaps the most recognizable architectural anomaly in all of world mythology, its impossible construction serving as both fortress and vehicle, sanctuary and trap. This structure defies conventional understanding of building principles through its fundamental mobility, achieved by massive chicken legs that elevate the entire edifice above the forest floor. These legs, described consistently across regional variants as belonging to enormous roosters or hens, possess scales rather than feathers on their lower portions, creating a reptilian texture that gleams with an oily iridescence in moonlight. The feet themselves spread wide with talons that can grip earth, stone or tree roots with equal facility, each toe ending in a curved claw capable of gouging deep furrows in solid rock. The legs themselves measure between 10 and 15 feet in height, according to most traditional accounts, though some variants describe them as capable of extending or contracting based on the terrain or the hut's needs. The joints bend with audible creaking sounds that echo through the forest, particularly when the structure prepares to move or change position. The upper portions of the legs, where they connect to the hut's foundation, disappear into a mass of timber and iron reinforcement that suggests the organic and architectural elements have grown together, rather than being assembled through conventional construction methods. The hut proper presents a structure that appears ramshackle and precarious, yet possesses supernatural durability that allows it to withstand weather, impacts, and the constant stress of movement. Traditional descriptions emphasize the patchwork nature of its construction, with walls composed of logs of different sizes and ages, some appearing freshly cut while others show signs of centuries of weathering. The gaps between logs are filled with a mixture that varies by regional tradition, sometimes clay mixed with ground bones, other times a mortar that appears to contain hair, fingernails, and other organic materials that suggest human origin. The roof consists of overlapping wooden shingles that have warped and twisted with age, creating a surface that resembles scales or feathers depending on the viewing angle. These shingles possess the unusual property of being able to shed water completely while simultaneously allowing smoke to pass through without visible openings, suggesting a supernatural permeability that responds to different types of matter. During rainstorms, water runs off the roof in streams that never touch the walls of the hut, instead falling directly to the ground in a perfect circle around the chicken legs. The single door of the hut faces away from approaching visitors by default, presenting them with the windowless rear wall and forcing them to request that the structure turn around. This orientation serves as the first test for anyone seeking entry, requiring knowledge of the proper formula for addressing the dwelling. The most common traditional phrase, little hut, turn your back to the forest and your front to me, must be spoken with the correct intonation and genuine need, as the hut can apparently distinguish between casual curiosity and legitimate purpose. When the hut rotates to face a visitor, the movement occurs with deliberate slowness that emphasises the supernatural nature of the act. The chicken legs lift alternately, turning the structure in a series of careful steps that avoid disturbing the surrounding trees despite the apparent clumsiness of the motion. The rotation produces a symphony of sounds, the creaking of aged wood, the grinding of the leg joints, the rustling of disturbed earth and vegetation, and occasionally the sound of small objects falling from hidden recesses within the structure. The door itself presents another layer of symbolic complexity, appearing as a simple wooden portal but possessing characteristics that mark it as a threshold between worlds. The wood appears to be carved from a single massive tree with grain patterns that seem to shift and flow when viewed directly. Iron hinges, black with age and use, show no signs of rust despite their obvious antiquity. The door handle, when present, takes the form of a bone, sometimes described as a human femur, other times as the leg bone of some enormous bird, worn smooth by countless hands. The windows of the hut, when they appear at all, are few and small, positioned asymmetrically on the walls in ways that suggest they were added as afterthoughts rather than planned elements of the design. These openings are typically covered with shutters made from materials that match the door, aged wood bound with iron and carved with symbols that resist clear identification. When the shutters are open, the windows reveal not the interior of the hut, but scenes from other locations entirely, sometimes distant forests, sometimes underground caverns, occasionally glimpses of other worlds where different physical laws apply. The fence surrounding the hut represents one of the most macabre and symbolically rich elements of the entire complex. Constructed from human bones of various sizes, the fence posts consist primarily of femurs and tibias driven into the earth, while the horizontal rails are made from arm bones and ribs lashed together with sinew or rope made from human hair. The spacing between posts allows for easy passage, suggesting that the fence serves more as a symbolic boundary than a physical barrier. Each post is topped with a human skull, positioned to face outward from the hut's perimeter, creating a circle of empty eye sockets that seem to track movement around the property. These skulls possess supernatural properties that extend beyond their obvious function as warnings to potential intruders. Traditional accounts describe them as retaining some vestige of consciousness from their original owners, allowing them to serve as sentries that can detect approaching visitors from great distances. The eye sockets glow with different colours depending on the nature of the approaching person. White light for the pure of heart, red for those with evil intentions, and blue for those who carry supernatural power themselves. During certain phases of the moon or on specific calendar dates associated with the boundary between seasons, the skulls can speak, offering cryptic warnings or advice to those who know how to interpret their words. The gate in this fence of bones presents its own unique characteristics, consisting of a framework of larger bones, typically described as belonging to giants or other supernatural beings, that supports a door made from a massive rib cage. This gate opens only when Baba Yaga wills it, or when visitors demonstrate their worthiness through proper knowledge of the required rituals or passwords. The hinges of this gate are formed from the joints of the giant bones themselves, creating a mechanism that operates silently despite its organic construction. The interior of the hut defies the spatial limitations suggested by its external dimensions, containing rooms and passages that could not possibly fit within the structure as viewed from outside. This supernatural expansion of interior space reflects ancient Slavic beliefs about the malleable nature of reality in places where the boundary between worlds has been weakened or deliberately breached. The main room typically contains a massive stove built from stones that radiate heat without any visible fire, its interior large enough to accommodate a human body, a detail that features prominently in many traditional tales. The furnishings within the hut consist primarily of items crafted from bone, wood, and iron, with very few textiles or other soft materials. Chairs and tables carved from single pieces of wood show wear patterns that suggest centuries of use, while shelves built into the walls hold collections of bottles, jars, and containers filled with substances that defy identification. The floor consists of packed earth, covered with rush mats that appear to be woven from human hair, creating a surface that is both practical and deeply unsettling. The symbolism of the chicken legs extends far beyond their obvious function as a means of locomotion, connecting the hut to ancient Slavic beliefs about the relationship between earth and sky, life and death, and the domestic and the wild. Chickens and roosters held particular significance in pre-Christian Slavic religious practices, serving as intermediaries between the human world and the realm of spirits. The rooster's crow marked the transition between night and day, a liminal moment when supernatural forces were believed to be most active, while the hen's ability to produce eggs represented the mysterious process by which life emerged from apparent death. The elevation of the hut above the ground on these legs creates a structure that exists literally between earth and sky, occupying the middle realm that ancient Slavic cosmology recognized as the domain of supernatural beings who mediated between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. This positioning allows the hut to serve as a way station for souls in transition, a place where the recently deceased could receive guidance before continuing their journey to whatever afterlife awaited them. The ability of the legs to move the hut from place to place reflects the ancient understanding that supernatural dwellings were not bound by the same geographical constraints that limited human habitation. The hut could appear wherever its services were needed, manifesting at crossroads, forest clearings, or other liminal spaces where the boundary between worlds was naturally thin. This mobility also allowed Baba Yaga to avoid the efforts of those who might seek to constrain or destroy her, ensuring that her dwelling remained accessible to those with legitimate need, while staying beyond the reach of those who would abuse her power. The chicken legs also represent a fusion of domestic and wild elements that mirrors Baba Yaga's own nature as a being who possesses knowledge of both civilized arts and untamed natural forces. The chicken, as a domesticated bird, represents human mastery over nature and the transformation of wild creatures into sources of sustenance and utility. However, the enormous size and supernatural properties of these particular legs suggest a return to wildness, a domesticated creature that has grown beyond human control and resumed its connection to primal natural forces. Regional variations in the description of the hut and its chicken legs reveal different emphases in local folklore, while maintaining the essential characteristics that mark the structure as a supernatural dwelling. Northern Slavic traditions often describe the legs as belonging to roosters, emphasizing their connection to solar symbolism and the daily cycle of light and darkness. Southern variants more frequently specify hen legs, focusing on themes of fertility, protection of the young, and the nurturing aspects of the feminine divine that Baba Yaga represents in her more benevolent manifestations. The hut's ability to spin serves multiple functions within the context of traditional narratives, operating as both a defensive mechanism and a test of visitors' worthiness. When threatened or when approached by someone with ill intent, the hut can rotate continuously, creating a whirlwind effect that prevents approach while generating enough force to uproot nearby trees and scatter any objects left in the surrounding area. This spinning motion also serves to disorient potential attackers, making it impossible to predict where the door might be at any given moment, or to maintain a steady approach to the structure. The test aspect of the hut's rotation requires visitors to demonstrate not only knowledge of the proper words to make it stop and face them, but also the patience and respect necessary to wait for the structure to complete its movement at its own pace. Those who attempt to force entry while the hut is spinning, or who become frustrated and abandon their quest, reveal themselves as unworthy of Baba Yaga's attention and assistance. The rotation thus serves as an initial screening mechanism that eliminates casual seekers, while allowing those with genuine need and proper preparation to proceed. Similar structures appear throughout Slavic mythology in various forms, suggesting that the concept of supernatural dwellings elevated on animal legs represents a widespread mythological motif, rather than a unique invention associated solely with Baba Yaga. Polish folklore includes references to huts on goose legs that serve as dwellings for other supernatural beings, while Czech traditions describe structures supported by the legs of various forest animals. These parallel examples reinforce the interpretation of such dwellings as markers of liminal space, places where the normal rules of physical reality are suspended in favour of supernatural logic. The shared symbolic functions of these elevated dwellings across different Slavic cultures point to common underlying beliefs about the nature of supernatural space and the requirements for accessing otherworldly wisdom. The elevation above ground level consistently represents separation from normal earthly concerns, while the animal legs suggest a connection to instinctual knowledge and natural cycles that transcend human understanding. The mobility of these structures reflects the ancient belief that supernatural aid could not be commanded or controlled, but had to be sought out through proper preparation and genuine need. The architectural impossibility of Baba Yaga's dwelling serves as more than mere supernatural spectacle. It functions as the physical manifestation of her role as guardian of the threshold between worlds, a position that places her among the most significant Psychopomp figures in Slavic mythology. The term Psychopomp, derived from Greek but applicable across cultures, describes entities that guide souls between the realm of the living and the domain of the dead, facilitating transitions that ordinary mortals cannot navigate without supernatural assistance. Baba Yaga's function in this capacity extends far beyond simple guidance, encompassing the complex responsibilities of gatekeeper, judge, and transformer of those who seek passage between states of existence. Her position at the boundary between worlds manifests most clearly in the geographical placement of her encounters with mortals. Traditional narratives consistently locate these meetings at specific types of liminal spaces: crossroads where multiple paths converge, clearings where forest meets meadow, riverbanks where water meets land, and mountain passes where valleys connect across seemingly impassable terrain. These locations possess inherent supernatural significance in Slavic cosmology, representing points where the fabric of reality becomes thin enough to allow communication and travel between different planes of existence. The crossroads hold particular importance in understanding Baba Yaga's Psychopomp function, as these intersections served as sacred spaces in pre-Christian Slavic religious practice. Archaeological evidence from early Slavic settlements reveals that crossroads were often marked with wooden posts carved with protective symbols, and that ritual activities including offerings to supernatural beings regularly took place at these locations. The crossroads represented decision points not only in physical travel but in spiritual journey, places where individuals could alter their life path through interaction with otherworldly forces. When Baba Yaga appears at crossroads in traditional narratives, she typically presents travellers with choices that will determine not only their immediate fate, but their fundamental relationship with the supernatural world. These encounters follow established patterns that reveal her role as a testing agent, whose purpose extends beyond simple obstruction or aid. The tests she presents require demonstration of specific virtues: courage in the face of terror, wisdom in solving seemingly impossible puzzles, compassion toward those who appear to deserve none, and respect for natural forces that humans typically seek to dominate or ignore. The nature of these tests reveals the ancient Slavic understanding of the qualities necessary for successful navigation of spiritual transitions. Courage alone proves insufficient without wisdom to guide its application, while wisdom without compassion leads to the cold calculation that destroys the soul's capacity for growth and transformation. The emphasis on respect for natural forces reflects the fundamental Slavic belief that supernatural power flows from harmony with rather than dominance over the elemental forces that govern existence. Her function as gatekeeper extends beyond individual encounters to encompass broader responsibilities for maintaining the integrity of the boundaries between worlds. Traditional accounts describe her as possessing the authority to open or seal passages between the realm of the living and the domain of the dead, preventing unauthorized crossings that could disrupt the cosmic order. This responsibility requires her to evaluate not only the worthiness of individual souls seeking passage, but also the broader implications of their transition for both the world they leave behind and the realm they seek to enter. The evaluation process Baba Yaga employs reveals sophisticated understanding of moral and spiritual development that transcends simple notions of good and evil. Her judgments consider the entirety of an individual's character development, their capacity for growth and change, and their potential impact on the cosmic balance that maintains stability across multiple planes of existence. Those who fail her tests face consequences that range from immediate destruction to transformation into forms that reflect their spiritual inadequacies, while those who succeed receive not only safe passage, but often additional gifts that enhance their ability to fulfill their destiny in whatever realm they enter. The initiation rites associated with Baba Yaga encounters demonstrate her central role in Slavic coming-of-age traditions, particularly those involving the transition from childhood to adult responsibility. These narratives typically feature young protagonists who must leave the safety of their familiar environment to seek solutions to problems that threaten their community's survival. The journey to Baba Yaga's dwelling represents the symbolic death of childhood innocence and dependence, while the successful completion of her challenges marks the birth of adult capability and wisdom. The structure of these initiation narratives follows patterns that mirror actual ritual practices documented in various Slavic communities well into the medieval period. Young people approaching adulthood would undergo ceremonial ordeals designed to test their readiness for adult responsibilities, often involving temporary separation from their community and exposure to controlled dangers that required them to demonstrate physical courage, mental resourcefulness, and spiritual maturity. The successful completion of these ordeals marks their acceptance as full members of adult society, with all the rights and responsibilities that status entailed. Baba Yaga's role in these symbolic initiations extends beyond simple testing to include active instruction in the knowledge and skills necessary for adult life. Her challenges often require protagonists to master domestic arts like cooking, cleaning, and textile production, but under supernatural conditions that transform routine tasks into spiritual exercises. The act of sweeping her yard while avoiding the fence of skulls teaches attention to detail and respect for the dead, while preparing food according to her exacting standards develops both practical skills and the patience necessary for successful completion of complex tasks. The transformative nature of these encounters reflects the ancient understanding that genuine initiation requires fundamental change in the initiate's consciousness and capabilities. Those who approach Baba Yaga as children and successfully complete her challenges return to their communities as adults, who possess not only enhanced practical abilities, but also spiritual insights that enable them to serve as bridges between the mundane world of daily life and the supernatural realm of ancestral wisdom and natural forces. Her dual nature as both helper and hindrance creates a complex dynamic that reflects the ambiguous relationship between human consciousness and the forces that govern spiritual development. The same entity who provides life-saving assistance to worthy seekers can become a deadly obstacle to those who approach her with improper motivations or inadequate preparation. This duality serves important functions within the context of Slavic spiritual understanding, emphasizing that supernatural aid comes with corresponding responsibilities, and that power obtained through otherworldly assistance must be used in accordance with cosmic principles rather than personal desires. The helpful aspect of Baba Yaga's nature manifests in her provision of magical objects, secret knowledge, and direct intervention on behalf of those who demonstrate worthiness through their actions rather than their words. Traditional narratives describe her giving heroes enchanted items that provide protection against supernatural threats, information about the weaknesses of seemingly invincible enemies, and guidance for navigating otherworldly landscapes that would otherwise prove impossible to traverse. These gifts typically come with specific instructions for their proper use and warnings about the consequences of misusing the power they represent. The hindering aspect of her nature serves equally important functions in the spiritual development of those who encounter her. Her obstacles force heroes to develop resourcefulness, persistence, and creative problem-solving abilities that they would not acquire through easier paths to their goals. The terror she inspires tests their commitment to their quest, while the seemingly impossible tasks she assigns push them to discover capabilities they did not know they possessed. Even her threats of death or transformation serve constructive purposes by forcing heroes to confront their deepest fears and overcome the psychological limitations that prevent them from achieving their full potential. This dynamic tension between assistance and obstruction reflects the ancient Slavic understanding that spiritual growth requires the navigation of challenges that cannot be avoided or circumvented through clever shortcuts. The path to wisdom and power necessarily involves encounters with forces that test the seeker's resolve and character, and these tests must be genuine rather than ceremonial if they are to produce meaningful transformation. Baba Yaga's role as both potential ally and certain enemy ensures that her challenges maintain the authenticity necessary for genuine spiritual development. Her relationship with other threshold guardians in Slavic folklore reveals a complex network of supernatural entities who share responsibility for maintaining the boundaries between different states of existence. These figures include the domovoi, household spirits who guard the threshold between the domestic space of human habitation and the wild realm beyond the home's protective boundaries. The domovoi serves as a benevolent counterpart to Baba Yaga's more ambiguous nature, offering protection and guidance to family members while maintaining strict standards for proper behavior within the household. The rusalka, spirits of women who died by drowning and subsequently haunted bodies of water, represent another category of threshold guardian whose domain encompasses the boundary between land and water, life and death. These entities share with Baba Yaga the characteristic of being simultaneously helpful and dangerous, capable of providing assistance to those who approach them with proper respect, while destroying those who violate the protocols necessary for safe interaction with supernatural forces. Forest spirits like the Leshy occupy territorial boundaries within the natural world, serving as guardians of specific woodland areas and the creatures that inhabit them. The Leshy's relationship with human visitors mirrors many aspects of Baba Yaga's interactions with mortals, involving tests of character and respect for natural forces that determine whether the encounter results in assistance or destruction. The Leshy's ability to lead travellers astray or guide them safely through dangerous terrain depends on their demonstration of proper attitudes toward the forest and its inhabitants. The Vodyanoi, water spirits who dwell in rivers, lakes and ponds, serve as guardians of aquatic boundaries and the souls of those who have drowned. These entities share with Baba Yaga the role of Psychopomp, guiding the spirits of the drowned to their proper place in the afterlife while maintaining the boundary between the world of the living and the underwater realm of the dead. The Vodyanoi's collection of souls in underwater palaces parallels Baba Yaga's accumulation of skulls and bones, both practices serving to maintain the cosmic balance between life and death. The coordination between these various threshold guardians suggests a systematic approach to boundary maintenance that ensures comprehensive coverage of all the liminal spaces where supernatural encounters might occur. Each type of guardian specializes in specific categories of boundary: domestic versus wild, terrestrial versus aquatic, individual versus collective, while maintaining communication and cooperation with other supernatural entities to prevent gaps in coverage that might allow unauthorized passage between worlds. Baba Yaga's position within this network places her at the apex of threshold guardian hierarchy, with authority that extends across multiple types of boundaries and the power to coordinate the activities of other supernatural entities when circumstances require collective action. Her mobility through flight allows her to respond to boundary breaches that occur beyond the territorial limits of more localized guardians, while her superior power enables her to handle threats that exceed the capabilities of lesser supernatural beings. The seasonal aspects of her guardian function reveal the connection between cosmic cycles and the intensity of supernatural activity at different times of the year. Traditional narratives show increased frequency of Baba Yaga encounters during transitional seasons, spring and autumn, when the boundary between life and death becomes more permeable due to the natural cycles of growth and decay. These periods require enhanced vigilance from threshold guardians to manage the increased traffic of souls and spirits moving between different states of existence. The autumn encounters often involve themes of harvest and preparation for winter's symbolic death, with Baba Yaga serving as a guide for souls who must make the transition from active life to the dormant state that enables survival through the dark months. Spring encounters typically focus on themes of renewal and rebirth, with her assistance enabling the return of life force to the world after winter's temporary reign of death and dormancy. The winter encounters frequently center on themes of endurance and the wisdom necessary for surviving periods of spiritual darkness, with her challenges designed to develop the inner resources that enable individuals to maintain their essential nature despite external pressures that would otherwise overwhelm their capacity for growth and positive action. Among the most profound and cosmologically significant elements within Baba Yaga's domain stands the mysterious trio of horsemen who serve as her supernatural agents and messengers. These three riders, the White Horseman of Dawn, the Red Horseman of Day, and the Black Horseman of Night, represent one of the most sophisticated expressions of ancient Slavic understanding of temporal cycles and the supernatural forces that govern the passage of time itself. Their appearances in traditional narratives reveal Baba Yaga's authority, extending far beyond her role as threshold guardian to encompass direct control over the fundamental rhythms that structure all existence. The White Horseman manifests at the moment of dawn's first light, his appearance marking the daily transition from the realm of night into the domain of illumination and conscious activity. Traditional descriptions present him as a figure of ethereal beauty, mounted upon a horse whose coat gleams with the pure radiance of fresh snow touched by morning light. The rider himself appears as a young man of indeterminate age, his features possessing the timeless quality that marks beings who exist outside normal temporal constraints. His clothing consists of garments that appear to be woven from morning mist and early sunlight, creating a translucent effect that allows observers to perceive both his physical form and the landscape beyond simultaneously. The horse beneath him exhibits characteristics that transcend normal equine anatomy while maintaining recognizable horse-like proportions and movement patterns. Its mane flows with perpetual motion despite the absence of wind, each strand catching and reflecting light in ways that create shifting patterns of illumination across its neck and shoulders. The hooves produce no sound when they strike the ground, yet leave behind marks that glow with soft white light for several moments before fading completely. The animal's eyes burn with the cold fire of distant stars, possessing an intelligence that suggests awareness of cosmic forces beyond the comprehension of ordinary creatures. The White Horseman's passage through the world brings immediate and dramatic changes to the environment through which he travels. Darkness retreats before his approach, not gradually, but in distinct waves that roll back across the landscape like receding floodwaters. Nocturnal creatures cease their activities and seek shelter with an urgency that suggests instinctual recognition of a force that compels their withdrawal from active engagement with the world. Plants that have remained closed during the night hours begin to open in response to his presence, even before the sun itself becomes visible above the horizon. His role extends beyond simple herald of the coming day to encompass active participation in the cosmic mechanism that maintains the boundary between night and day. The White Horseman does not merely announce the dawn, but serves as the agent through which the transition occurs, his passage creating the conditions that allow daylight to establish its dominion over the world. This function requires him to engage in ongoing struggle with the forces of darkness that seek to extend their influence beyond the proper temporal boundaries, making him both messenger and warrior in the daily cosmic battle that ensures the continuation of natural cycles. The Red Horseman appears at the height of noon, when the sun reaches its maximum power and the forces of light achieve their greatest influence over the material world. His manifestation represents the full flowering of solar energy and the peak of conscious-directed activity. Traditional accounts describe him as a figure of mature masculine power mounted upon a stallion, whose coat burns with the deep crimson of iron heated in a forge. The rider's appearance suggests a warrior in his prime, with muscular development that speaks of countless battles fought and won, yet his expression maintains the serene confidence of one whose victory is assured through superior power rather than desperate struggle. His armour, when described in detail, consists of plates that appear to be forged from crystallized sunlight, creating protection that deflects both physical attacks and supernatural assaults while allowing complete freedom of movement. The armour's surface shifts between different shades of red depending on the viewing angle and the intensity of surrounding light, sometimes appearing as the deep crimson of fresh blood, other times glowing with the bright scarlet of flames at their hottest point. Weapons associated with the Red Horseman include a sword whose blade burns with solar fire and a spear that can pierce any defence through its connection to the irresistible force of noon sun. The horse he rides embodies the full power of solar energy channeled through living form, its coat rippling with waves of red and gold that create the visual impression of flames flowing across its body. The animal's breath produces clouds of steam that glow with internal light, while its hooves strike sparks from stone and earth that ignite dry vegetation and create small fires that burn without consuming their fuel. The creature's eyes blaze with the intensity of the noon sun itself, capable of burning through deceptions and illusions to reveal the true nature of any person or object upon which their gaze falls. During his passage across the sky, the Red Horseman brings the world to its peak of activity and energy, inspiring both human and animal life to engage in their most demanding and productive endeavours. His influence extends to plant growth, causing flowers to open fully and fruits to ripen with accelerated speed. The psychological effects of his presence include heightened alertness, increased physical strength, and enhanced mental clarity that allows for the completion of tasks that would ordinarily require much longer periods of sustained effort. The cosmic function of the Red Horseman involves maintaining the balance between the forces of creation and destruction that reach their most intense interaction during the peak hours of daylight. His presence ensures that the creative energy of the sun does not become so intense as to destroy the very life it seeks to nurture, while simultaneously preventing the forces of entropy and decay from gaining foothold during the period of maximum light. This balancing act requires constant vigilance and the ability to make instantaneous adjustments to cosmic forces that operate on scales beyond human comprehension. The Black Horseman emerges with the arrival of true darkness, his appearance marking the transition from the twilight period of diminishing light into the full dominion of night. Traditional descriptions present him as a figure of solemn dignity, mounted upon a horse whose coat absorbs light so completely that its outline can be perceived only as a moving absence against the star-filled sky. The rider himself appears as a mature man whose features suggest wisdom gained through long observation of the world's hidden truths, his expression combining compassion for mortal struggles with the detachment necessary for fair judgment of human actions. His clothing consists of garments that seem to be cut from the fabric of night itself, creating the impression that he wears darkness as other beings wear cloth or leather. These garments move with independent life, flowing and shifting in patterns that mirror the movement of shadows cast by flickering flames. The material appears to contain depths that extend far beyond its apparent surface, creating the optical illusion that observers could fall into the clothing and find themselves transported to distant realms where different physical laws govern existence. The horse beneath him represents the embodiment of night's mysteries and the hidden knowledge that becomes accessible only when the distractions of daylight have been removed from consciousness. Its coat exhibits the deep black of underground caverns where no light has ever penetrated, yet its surface occasionally reflects starlight in patterns that suggest constellations visible only to those who possess supernatural sight. The animal's mane flows like liquid shadow, creating trails of darkness that linger in the air long after its passage. Its hooves make contact with the ground in perfect silence, yet their impact creates ripples of darkness that spread outward like waves on the surface of a midnight pond. The environmental effects of the Black Horseman's passage involve the systematic withdrawal of light and the emergence of nocturnal forces that remain dormant during daylight hours. His approach causes shadows to deepen and extend beyond their normal boundaries, creating pools of darkness that serve as gateways for supernatural beings who cannot manifest during periods of solar dominance. Night-blooming flowers open in response to his presence, while diurnal creatures seek shelter with the same instinctual urgency displayed by nocturnal animals at the approach of dawn. His cosmic function encompasses the maintenance of the boundary between conscious awareness and the unconscious realm of dreams, visions, and spiritual insight that becomes accessible only when normal sensory input has been reduced to minimal levels. The Black Horseman ensures that the transition into night consciousness occurs smoothly and safely, protecting sleepers from supernatural threats while simultaneously allowing access to the wisdom and guidance that can be obtained only through direct communication with otherworldly forces. The relationship between these three horsemen reveals a sophisticated understanding of temporal cycles that extends far beyond simple recognition of day and night as alternating periods of light and darkness. Their coordinated activities maintain the cosmic balance necessary for the continuation of life, while ensuring that each phase of the daily cycle provides appropriate conditions for different types of spiritual and physical development. The White Horseman's function involves the activation of conscious awareness and the initiation of directed activity, while the Red Horseman maintains the peak intensity necessary for accomplishing demanding tasks and achieving significant goals. The Black Horseman's role encompasses the provision of rest and renewal, while simultaneously opening access to sources of wisdom and insight that remain hidden during periods of intense conscious activity. This tripartite division of temporal responsibility ensures that all aspects of existence receive appropriate support and guidance, while preventing any single force from achieving dominance that would disrupt the delicate balance necessary for continued growth and development. The colour symbolism associated with each horseman connects their individual functions to broader patterns of meaning within Slavic cosmological understanding. White represents purity, new beginnings, and the potential for positive change that comes with each new day. This colour association links the White Horseman to concepts of spiritual cleansing, the renewal of hope after periods of darkness, and the opportunity for fresh starts that dawn provides to all living beings. The White Horse serves as a symbol of divine grace and the intervention of benevolent forces on behalf of those who maintain proper relationship with cosmic principles. Red symbolizes active power, the life force in its most dynamic expression, and the courage necessary for engaging with challenges that require maximum effort and determination. The Red Horseman's association with this colour connects him to the warrior aspects of solar energy and the aggressive pursuit of goals that demand the full deployment of available resources. Red also represents the blood that carries life throughout the body, linking the horseman to the vital energy that sustains all living beings during their periods of greatest activity and achievement. Black encompasses the mystery of the unknown, the wisdom that comes through direct experience of forces that cannot be understood through rational analysis, and the protective darkness that shields developing consciousness from premature exposure to overwhelming truths. The Black Horseman's connection to this colour associates him with the beneficial aspects of darkness that nurture growth and provide access to spiritual resources unavailable during daylight consciousness. Black also represents the fertile void from which new creation emerges, connecting the horseman to the generative potential that lies dormant during periods of apparent inactivity. The ancient Slavic understanding of these colour associations draws from observation of natural cycles and the recognition that different phases of temporal progression require different approaches to spiritual and practical development. The white of dawn represents the blank slate of potential that each new day provides, while the red of noon embodies the full manifestation of that potential through directed action. The black of night encompasses both the completion of the day's cycle and the preparation for the next cycle's beginning, creating a continuous flow of energy that maintains life's forward momentum while providing necessary periods of rest and renewal. The horseman's service to Baba Yaga reveals her position as a cosmic force, whose authority extends to the fundamental mechanisms that govern temporal progression and the distribution of different types of energy throughout the daily cycle. The absolute obedience to her commands demonstrates that her power transcends the normal limitations that constrain other supernatural beings, placing her among the primordial forces that establish the basic parameters within which all other existence operates. This relationship also suggests that her dwelling exists outside normal temporal constraints, allowing her to coordinate the activities of beings whose functions are intimately connected to specific moments in the daily cycle. Traditional narratives describe occasions when Baba Yaga dispatches one or more of the horsemen on missions that require intervention in human affairs or the correction of disruptions to natural order caused by the inappropriate use of supernatural power. These missions typically involve the restoration of proper temporal boundaries when other supernatural beings have attempted to extend their influence beyond appropriate limits, or the enforcement of cosmic law, when human actions threaten to destabilize the delicate balance between different planes of existence. The horseman's ability to travel instantly across vast distances and to manifest simultaneously in multiple locations reflects their nature as expressions of cosmic forces rather than individual beings constrained by normal physical limitations. Their appearance in response to Baba Yaga's summons occurs without regard for their current location or activities, suggesting that their primary existence occurs in a realm where spatial and temporal constraints operate according to different principles than those governing normal material existence. The knowledge possessed by each horseman corresponds to their specific temporal domain and the types of activities that occur during their periods of influence. The white horseman understands the mysteries of beginning and renewal, possessing insight into the forces that enable new growth and the overcoming of obstacles that have prevented progress. The red horseman comprehends the principles of achievement and the proper application of power for accomplishing goals that require maximum effort and unwavering determination. The black horseman holds knowledge of endings and transitions, understanding the processes through which completion leads to new beginning and apparent death gives rise to transformed existence. The wisdom that each horseman possesses becomes accessible to mortal visitors through the complex system of challenges that Baba Yaga employs, to evaluate those who seek her assistance. These tests represent far more than arbitrary obstacles designed to frustrate or eliminate supplicants. They constitute a comprehensive examination system that reveals the true nature of the seeker's character, while simultaneously providing opportunities for spiritual and practical development that cannot be obtained through conventional means. The challenges she presents follow established patterns that have been preserved across generations of oral tradition, each category of tests serving specific functions within the broader framework of initiation and transformation that governs supernatural encounters in Slavic folklore. The domestic tasks that Baba Yaga assigns to visitors represent perhaps the most deceptive category of her challenges, as their apparent simplicity masks profound spiritual significance and practical difficulty that extends far beyond normal household maintenance. The cleaning of her hut, a task that appears in numerous traditional narratives, requires visitors to maintain the dwelling's interior while avoiding contact with the supernatural elements that permeate every surface and object within the structure. The floors must be swept clean of accumulated debris that includes not only ordinary dirt and dust, but also fragments of bone, dried blood, and organic materials of uncertain origin that resist normal cleaning methods. The sweeping itself must be accomplished using tools provided by Baba Yaga, typically a broom constructed from birch twigs bound with sinew or human hair, its handle carved from wood taken from trees that have grown in graveyards or other places where the boundary between life and death has been weakened. The broom possesses supernatural properties that allow it to detect and remove spiritual contamination along with physical debris, but its use requires precise technique and unwavering concentration to avoid accidentally disturbing protective barriers or summoning entities that feed on the psychic residue left by previous visitors. The washing of dishes and cooking implements presents additional layers of complexity, as these items retain traces of the meals they have been used to prepare, meals that often consisted of ingredients derived from supernatural sources or intended for consumption by beings whose digestive requirements differ dramatically from those of ordinary mortals. The water used for washing must be drawn from specific sources according to Baba Yaga's instructions, sometimes requiring trips to distant springs or wells that exist in locations where normal geography becomes unreliable. The soap, when provided, consists of substances that burn the skin of those whose moral character contains significant flaws, while cleansing without harm those who maintain proper spiritual balance. The preparation of meals for Baba Yaga herself constitutes one of the most demanding categories of domestic challenge, requiring knowledge of cooking techniques that transform raw ingredients into forms suitable for consumption by a being whose nature transcends normal biological limitations. The ingredients themselves often include items that would be considered inedible or dangerous by conventional standards, roots and herbs that are toxic to ordinary humans, meat from animals that exist only in supernatural realms, and liquids that possess properties more similar to alchemical compounds than to normal beverages. The cooking process must be accomplished using her massive stove, whose interior maintains temperatures that would instantly incinerate normal food, while somehow producing properly prepared meals when operated by someone who understands its supernatural characteristics. The fire within the stove burns without consuming fuel, its flames changing colour in response to the type of food being prepared and the emotional state of the cook. Blue flames indicate proper preparation technique and pure motivation, while red flames suggest technical errors or impure intentions that will result in food unsuitable for Baba Yaga's consumption. The timing of meal preparation requires precise coordination with cosmic cycles that govern Baba Yaga's periods of hunger and satisfaction. Meals served too early or too late fail to provide proper nourishment regardless of their technical quality, while those prepared at the correct moment according to supernatural rather than conventional time measurements achieve the transformative effects that sustain her otherworldly existence. The cook must therefore develop sensitivity to temporal rhythms that operate independently of normal day and night cycles, learning to recognize the subtle environmental changes that signal the appropriate moments for beginning and completing different phases of food preparation. The sorting of seeds represents another category of domestic task that appears frequently in traditional narratives, typically involving the separation of different types of grain or legume that have been deliberately mixed together in quantities that would require weeks of normal human effort to organize properly. The seeds themselves often include varieties that do not exist in the ordinary world, their identification requiring knowledge of supernatural botany that must be acquired through careful observation and intuitive understanding, rather than conventional study. The sorting must be completed within time limits that make success impossible through normal human effort, forcing visitors to develop alternative approaches that demonstrate creativity, resourcefulness, and willingness to seek assistance from unexpected sources. Success often requires the ability to communicate with small creatures, mice, birds, insects, who possess the specialized knowledge and capabilities necessary for rapid completion of the task. This requirement tests the visitor's humility and their understanding of the interconnectedness of all life forms, as those who consider themselves superior to such creatures fail to obtain the cooperation necessary for success. The maintenance of Baba Yaga's yard presents challenges that combine physical labor with spiritual discipline, as the area surrounding her dwelling contains numerous hazards that can destroy the unwary, while simultaneously serving as sources of power and knowledge for those who approach them with proper understanding. The fence of skulls requires regular attention to maintain its protective and decorative functions, with each skull needing to be cleaned and repositioned according to specific protocols that prevent the residual consciousness within them from becoming hostile or confused. The cleaning of skulls must be accomplished using water drawn from sources that possess purifying properties without destroying the supernatural essence that enables their continued function as sentries and advisors. The cleaning cloths must be made from materials that can absorb spiritual contamination without becoming permanently tainted, typically requiring the use of specially prepared textiles that have been blessed according to ancient rituals or woven from fibers that possess natural resistance to supernatural influence. The garden areas within the yard contain plants that serve both practical and mystical functions, their cultivation requiring knowledge of agricultural techniques adapted to supernatural conditions. Some plants thrive only when watered with tears shed under specific emotional circumstances, while others require soil that has been enriched with materials that would be considered inappropriate or dangerous in normal agricultural contexts. The harvesting of these plants must be timed according to lunar and stellar cycles that govern their potency, with improper timing resulting in crops that lack the supernatural properties that make them valuable to Baba Yaga. The riddles that Baba Yaga poses to visitors represent intellectual challenges that test not only knowledge and reasoning ability, but also intuitive understanding of cosmic principles that govern the relationship between different planes of existence. These riddles typically involve paradoxes that cannot be resolved through conventional logic, requiring answers that demonstrate comprehension of the fundamental interconnectedness of seemingly contradictory concepts. The questions often focus on the nature of life and death, the relationship between wisdom and ignorance, and the proper understanding of power and responsibility. One category of riddle involves questions about the nature of time and its relationship to consciousness, challenging visitors to explain how past, present, and future can exist simultaneously while remaining distinct from one another. The correct answers require understanding of temporal mechanics that operate according to supernatural rather than physical principles, demonstrating comprehension of the way consciousness can transcend normal sequential experience to achieve direct awareness of eternal truths. Another category focuses on the relationship between individual identity and cosmic consciousness, posing questions about the nature of the self and its connection to universal forces that transcend personal existence. These riddles test the visitor's understanding of the way individual consciousness serves as both a unique expression of cosmic awareness and a temporary manifestation of eternal principles that continue to operate regardless of the fate of any particular being. The riddles concerning the nature of power and its proper application challenge visitors to demonstrate understanding of the responsibilities that accompany supernatural abilities and the consequences that result from their misuse. The correct answers reveal comprehension of the way power flows through cosmic systems according to principles of balance and reciprocity that ensure its continued availability for those who use it in harmony with universal law. The pattern of 3 tasks that appears consistently throughout Baba Yaga narratives reflects deep structural principles within Slavic storytelling traditions and cosmological understanding. This tripartite organization corresponds to the 3-phase structure of many natural cycles: birth, maturity and death, dawn, noon and night, spring, summer and winter, while also reflecting the 3-stage process of spiritual development that transforms seekers from their initial state of ignorance through intermediate understanding to final wisdom. The first task typically involves challenges that test basic competence and commitment, requiring demonstration of practical skills and emotional stability necessary for undertaking more demanding trials. These initial challenges eliminate casual seekers while providing serious supplicants with opportunities to develop confidence and familiarity with supernatural conditions that will be essential for success in subsequent tests. The second task usually presents greater complexity and danger, requiring the integration of skills and knowledge acquired during the first challenge, while introducing new elements that demand creative problem-solving and adaptability. This intermediate stage tests the visitor's ability to maintain focus and determination when confronted with obstacles that exceed their previous experience, while simultaneously providing opportunities for growth that prepare them for the final and most demanding trial. The third task represents the culmination of the testing process, requiring the full deployment of all capabilities developed during the previous challenges, while introducing elements that can be successfully navigated only through the achievement of genuine wisdom and spiritual maturity. This final test often involves moral choices that reveal the visitor's true character and ultimate objectives, with success depending not only on technical competence, but on demonstration of the ethical development necessary for responsible use of whatever power or knowledge Baba Yaga might provide. The significance of this 3-task structure extends beyond simple narrative convenience to encompass fundamental principles of learning and development that operate in both mundane and supernatural contexts. The progression from simple to complex challenges mirrors the natural process through which mastery is achieved in any field of endeavour, while the increasing emphasis on wisdom and character development reflects the understanding that true power requires corresponding ethical development to prevent its misuse. The integration of domestic tasks with spiritual testing reveals the ancient Slavic understanding that the sacred and mundane aspects of existence are fundamentally interconnected, rather than separate domains that require different approaches or attitudes. The transformation of routine household activities into opportunities for spiritual development demonstrates that enlightenment can be achieved through dedicated attention to ordinary responsibilities when they are approached with proper understanding and motivation. The emphasis on practical skills within these tests reflects the pragmatic orientation of Slavic culture, and the recognition that spiritual development must be grounded in competence within the material world rather than pursued as an escape from practical responsibilities. The ability to maintain a dwelling, prepare food, and organize resources represents fundamental capabilities that enable individuals to contribute to community welfare while pursuing personal growth and development. The supernatural elements embedded within these apparently mundane tasks serve to intensify the learning experience, while providing access to forms of knowledge and capability that cannot be obtained through conventional means. The heightened awareness required for success in supernatural conditions develops sensitivity and perception that enhance effectiveness in normal circumstances, while the courage and persistence necessary for completing impossible tasks build character traits that prove valuable in all aspects of life. The consequences of failure in Baba Yaga's tests reveal as much about her nature as the rewards granted to those who succeed, creating a complex moral framework that distinguishes her from simple malevolent entities who destroy indiscriminately. Her punishments typically correspond directly to the specific failures demonstrated by unsuccessful visitors, with the severity and nature of consequences reflecting both the magnitude of the transgression and the underlying character flaws that led to the failure. Those who approach her dwelling with selfish motivations often find themselves transformed into objects that serve others, wooden spoons that must feed hungry mouths, brooms that must clean endlessly, or stones that form part of her fence, forced to witness the approaches of future visitors while being unable to warn or assist them. The transformations she inflicts serve educational purposes that extend beyond simple punishment, creating opportunities for moral development through direct experience of the consequences that flow from particular character defects. A greedy visitor might become a cooking pot that can never be filled, experiencing perpetual hunger while being compelled to nourish others. A prideful supplicant could be transformed into a mirror that reflects only the flaws and imperfections of those who look into it, learning humility through constant exposure to the vanity and self-deception that once characterized their own behavior. These punishments operate according to principles of poetic justice that connect the nature of the transgression to the form of consequence in ways that provide ongoing opportunities for growth and eventual redemption. The temporary nature of many transformations demonstrates Baba Yaga's ultimate concern with education rather than permanent destruction, though the duration of these punishments can extend across multiple human lifetimes, depending on the severity of the original offence and the speed with which the transformed individual develops the understanding necessary for release. Some traditional narratives describe encounters with objects or creatures around her dwelling that were once human visitors, their current forms serving as warnings to new arrivals, while their continued existence suggests the possibility of eventual restoration to human form through proper spiritual development. The gifts that Baba Yaga bestows upon successful supplicants reveal her capacity for extraordinary generosity when her assistance is properly earned through demonstration of worthy character and genuine need. These rewards typically exceed the specific requests made by visitors, providing not only solutions to immediate problems, but additional capabilities that enhance the recipient's ability to serve their community and fulfill their spiritual potential. The magical objects she grants possess properties that adapt to the changing needs of their users, growing more powerful as the recipient develops greater wisdom and moral maturity, while becoming less effective or even dangerous if misused for selfish purposes. A gift of knowledge often proves more valuable than material objects, as the insights she provides enable recipients to understand fundamental principles that govern both supernatural and mundane aspects of existence. This knowledge typically comes in the form of direct transmission rather than verbal instruction, with successful visitors finding themselves possessed of understanding they did not previously have but cannot explain how they acquired. The information she provides often includes awareness of hidden connections between seemingly unrelated events, understanding of the true motivations behind the actions of other people, and insight into the long-term consequences that will result from different courses of action. The protective items she grants serve functions that extend far beyond simple defense against physical threats, providing safeguards against spiritual dangers that ordinary weapons and armor cannot address, cloaks that render the wearer invisible to hostile supernatural entities, rings that detect deception and malicious intent, and amulets that maintain connection to beneficial spiritual forces represent typical examples of her protective gifts. These items typically require no conscious activation by their users, responding automatically to threatening situations while remaining dormant during periods of safety. The agricultural gifts she provides reflect her ancient connections to Earth Goddess traditions and her understanding of the cycles that govern plant growth and crop production. Seeds that produce plants capable of growing in any soil or weather condition, tools that multiply the effectiveness of agricultural labour, and knowledge of cultivation techniques that ensure abundant harvests even during years of natural disaster, represent forms of assistance that benefit entire communities rather than individual recipients alone. These gifts often come with specific instructions regarding their proper use and distribution, emphasizing the responsibility that accompanies supernatural assistance. Her transportation gifts enable recipients to travel distances and traverse terrain that would otherwise be impossible to navigate, while simultaneously providing protection during journeys that involve passage through supernatural territories. 7-league boots that allow the wearer to cover vast distances in single steps, cloaks that enable flight through the air, and boats that can sail across land as easily as water represent examples of mobility enhancements that serve both practical and spiritual functions by enabling their users to fulfill missions that require access to remote or otherworldly locations. The healing gifts she provides address not only physical ailments, but spiritual and emotional wounds that conventional medicine cannot treat effectively. Waters that restore youth and vitality, herbs that cure diseases caused by supernatural influences, and knowledge of therapeutic techniques that address the root causes of illness rather than merely its symptoms, demonstrate her understanding of the interconnected nature of physical and spiritual health. These healing gifts often require the recipient to use them in service of others rather than for personal benefit, creating ongoing opportunities for moral development through acts of compassion and service. The weapons she grants to worthy heroes possess characteristics that make them effective against supernatural threats while remaining harmless to innocent beings, reflecting her understanding of the moral complexities that arise when power is used in pursuit of justice. Swords that can cut through any material but refuse to harm those who do not deserve injury. Arrows that never miss their intended target but cannot be used for assassination or murder. And shields that protect not only their bearers but also any innocent people in their vicinity, represent examples of armaments that embody ethical principles in their fundamental design. The condition she places on her gifts reveals sophisticated understanding of the psychological and spiritual factors that determine whether supernatural assistance will ultimately benefit or harm its recipients. Many of her gifts become less effective or cease functioning entirely if used for purposes other than those for which they were granted, ensuring that recipients maintain focus on their original noble objectives rather than being corrupted by the power they have received. Others require regular acts of service or charity to maintain their effectiveness, creating ongoing incentives for moral behaviour while providing benefits to the broader community. The testing of gift recipients continues long after they leave her dwelling, with the magical objects serving as ongoing evaluators of character development and spiritual progress. Items that initially provide modest assistance may grow more powerful as their users demonstrate increasing wisdom and compassion, while those who begin to misuse their gifts may find them becoming unreliable or even turning against them. This dynamic relationship between gift and recipient ensures that Baba Yaga's assistance continues to serve educational functions throughout the recipient's lifetime, rather than simply providing one-time solutions to immediate problems. The moral lessons embedded in her selective benevolence operate on multiple levels that address both individual character development and broader social values that govern community relationships and cultural transmission. Her emphasis on proper motivation demonstrates the importance of examining one's true reasons for seeking power or assistance, encouraging supplicants to develop genuine concern for others rather than pursuing supernatural aid for purely selfish purposes. The requirement for respectful approach teaches the value of humility and recognition of one's limitations, while the demand for persistent effort despite obstacles builds character traits necessary for long-term success in any endeavour. Her insistence on practical competence before granting supernatural assistance reflects the understanding that magical power without corresponding mundane skills creates dangerous imbalances that often lead to disaster for both the recipient and their community. The domestic tasks she assigns ensure that successful supplicants possess the basic life skills necessary for maintaining themselves and contributing to community welfare, while the problem-solving challenges develop mental flexibility and resourcefulness that prove essential for responsible use of supernatural capabilities. The interconnection between her tests and gifts creates a comprehensive system of character evaluation and development that serves functions similar to formal educational institutions, while operating according to principles that address spiritual and moral dimensions typically neglected by conventional learning systems. Her challenges provide opportunities for discovering and developing capabilities that recipients did not know they possessed, while her rewards enable the practical application of these newly discovered abilities in ways that benefit both individual and community welfare. The seasonal timing of many gift-giving episodes reveals her understanding of the relationship between cosmic cycles and optimal moments for implementing different types of change or development. Gifts granted during spring often focus on new beginnings and the cultivation of potential, while summer gifts emphasize the achievement of goals and the full expression of developed capabilities. Autumn gifts typically involve preparation for difficult periods and the wisdom necessary for making proper use of accumulated resources, while winter gifts provide the protection and inner strength necessary for surviving times of hardship and spiritual testing. The regional variations in her gift-giving patterns reflect local cultural values and environmental conditions, while maintaining consistent underlying principles that demonstrate the universal applicability of her moral framework. Northern Slavic traditions emphasize gifts related to survival in harsh climates and the development of community cooperation necessary for enduring long winters, while southern variants focus more heavily on agricultural abundance and the management of resources during periods of plenty. Eastern traditions often include gifts that enhance spiritual perception and communication with supernatural entities, while Western variants emphasize practical skills and material prosperity that enable successful interaction with neighboring cultures. The long-term consequences of receiving Baba Yaga's gifts extend across multiple generations, with the benefits and responsibilities associated with her assistance often passing to the children and grandchildren of original recipients. Families that maintain proper use of inherited magical objects may find their effectiveness increasing over time, while those who neglect the moral obligations associated with supernatural assistance may discover that the gifts become burdensome or dangerous. This generational aspect of her gift-giving creates ongoing incentives for maintaining high ethical standards, while ensuring that the benefits of supernatural assistance continue to serve community welfare across extended periods. The lineage connecting Baba Yaga to ancient Earth Goddess figures extends far beyond surface similarities, revealing a systematic transformation of divine feminine archetypes that once governed fertility, death, and rebirth cycles throughout prehistoric European societies. Her cannibalistic tendencies represent not merely random malevolence, but the preserved remnants of ancient ritual practices where Earth Goddesses consumed the dead to facilitate their transformation into new life. Archaeological evidence from early Slavic burial sites demonstrates that human remains were often processed and redistributed in ways that suggest ritualized consumption, with bones ground into powder for agricultural use and flesh offered to chthonic deities who governed the underground realm, where seeds germinated and corpses decomposed into fertile soil. The ancient Mokosh, the primary earth goddess of pre-Christian Slavic religion, possessed dual aspects that encompassed both nurturing fertility and destructive consumption. Historical accounts from Byzantine chroniclers describe Slavic religious practices involving the ritual feeding of human flesh to earth goddess figures during times of agricultural crisis, when normal fertility cycles had been disrupted by warfare, disease, or climatic disasters. These practices operated according to the principle of reciprocal exchange. The earth goddess who provided sustenance through crop growth required corresponding nourishment in the form of human sacrifice to maintain her power and willingness to continue supporting agricultural productivity. Baba Yaga's iron teeth serve as direct evolutionary descendants of the grinding implements associated with ancient earth goddesses, whose primary function involved processing organic matter to extract its essential life force for redistribution through natural cycles. The iron composition of these teeth connects her to metallurgical traditions that viewed the forging process as analogous to the transformation of dead matter into living substance. Iron ore extracted from the earth required heating, hammering, and reshaping to become useful tools, paralleling the way corpses required processing through consumption and digestion to become the spiritual energy that powered continued existence. The systematic nature of her cannibalistic activities reveals sophisticated understanding of the energetic principles that govern supernatural existence. Traditional narratives describe her consuming specific portions of victims according to established protocols that maximize the extraction of useful spiritual essence, while disposing of elements that would contaminate or weaken her otherworldly constitution. The bones provide calcium and minerals necessary for maintaining the structural integrity of her supernatural form, while the flesh supplies the protein required for continued physical manifestation in the material world. The blood serves as a conductor for life force energy, enabling her to absorb and integrate the accumulated experiences and capabilities of her victims. Her preference for consuming children and young adults reflects the ancient understanding that younger organisms contain higher concentrations of vital energy and possess fewer spiritual contaminants accumulated through exposure to moral corruption and physical decay. Children approaching puberty represent the optimal balance between sufficient life force development and minimal spiritual degradation, making them ideal sources of the pure energy required for maintaining supernatural existence across extended periods. The terror inspired by her targeting of youth serves protective functions within Slavic communities, encouraging parents to maintain vigilant supervision of their children, while teaching young people the importance of avoiding situations where they might encounter supernatural predators. The cautionary aspects of Baba Yaga narratives operate through multiple psychological mechanisms that shape behavior patterns across entire communities, rather than simply frightening individual listeners. Parents utilize her stories as disciplinary tools that establish clear consequences for disobedience, wandering away from safe areas, or engaging with strangers whose intentions cannot be verified. The specificity of her hunting patterns, targeting children who travel alone through forests, approach unfamiliar dwellings, or accept food from unknown sources, creates behavioral guidelines that reduce actual dangers from human predators, wild animals, and environmental hazards. The geographic distribution of these cautionary tales corresponds closely to regions where historical records document high rates of child mortality from causes that could be prevented through careful adherence to safety protocols, forest areas where children might become lost, river crossings where drowning represented constant threats, and border regions where warfare and raiding created ongoing dangers to civilian populations all feature prominently in Baba Yaga narratives that emphasize the consequences of violating established safety procedures. The social control functions of her stories extend beyond simple fear-based compliance to encompass the transmission of cultural values and community expectations across generations. Her punishment of children who display selfishness, disrespect for elders, or unwillingness to perform assigned tasks serves to reinforce social hierarchies and work ethics essential for community survival in harsh environments where individual failure could threaten group welfare. The consistency of these moral lessons across regional variants demonstrates their fundamental importance within Slavic cultural systems. The psychological impact of her cannibalistic imagery operates through primal fears that transcend cultural boundaries while simultaneously addressing specific anxieties related to survival in pre-industrial societies where food scarcity represented constant threats to individual and community welfare. The prospect of being consumed by a supernatural entity mirrors the very real possibility of starvation during failed harvests or extended winters, creating emotional resonance that enhances the effectiveness of behavioral modification through storytelling. The reversal of normal predator-prey relationships, with humans becoming food for a supernatural being rather than consumers of animal flesh, forces listeners to confront their vulnerability and dependence on forces beyond their direct control. Her role as devourer of the unwary serves specific functions within the broader context of Slavic initiation traditions, where encounters with death represent necessary stages in the development of adult consciousness and capability. Traditional coming-of-age ceremonies often included symbolic death and rebirth experiences designed to eliminate childish attitudes and behaviours while fostering the psychological resilience necessary for adult responsibilities. Baba Yaga's consumption of visitors who fail her tests represents the literal manifestation of this symbolic death, with successful candidates achieving genuine transformation through direct confrontation with the possibility of annihilation. The connection between consumption and transformation appears throughout ancient European religious traditions that view death not as termination, but as necessary preparation for existence in different forms or states of consciousness. The Celtic Druids practiced ritual cannibalism as a means of absorbing the knowledge and spiritual power of deceased individuals, while Germanic tribes consumed the hearts of defeated enemies to gain their courage and fighting ability. Baba Yaga's cannibalistic practices operate according to similar principles, with her consumption of victims serving to integrate their life experiences and capabilities into her own supernatural existence. The specificity of her dietary requirements reveals sophisticated understanding of the relationship between physical consumption and spiritual development that characterized ancient shamanic traditions throughout northern Eurasia. Siberian shamans regularly consumed human flesh during certain ritual contexts, believing that this practice enabled them to absorb the spiritual essence of the deceased and utilize their accumulated wisdom for the benefit of their communities. The preservation of these practices within Baba Yaga narratives suggests direct cultural transmission from prehistoric shamanic traditions that predated the establishment of organized agricultural societies. Her kitchen implements, the mortar and pestle used for grinding bones, the massive stove capable of cooking human-sized portions, and the various cutting and preparation tools crafted from supernatural materials represent specialized equipment designed for processing human remains according to established protocols that maximize nutritional and spiritual benefits. The iron construction of many implements connects her cannibalistic practices to metallurgical traditions that understood forging as a transformative process analogous to cooking, with heat and mechanical pressure converting raw materials into refined products possessing enhanced properties and capabilities. The seasonal timing of her hunting activities corresponds to periods when natural food sources become scarce and community resources face maximum strain from environmental pressures. Late winter and early spring represent traditional times of famine when stored provisions approach exhaustion and new crops have not yet matured sufficiently for harvest. Her increased activity during these periods reflects the ancient understanding that supernatural threats intensify when normal survival mechanisms prove inadequate, requiring enhanced vigilance and community cooperation to prevent losses that could threaten group survival. The territorial aspects of her cannibalistic behaviour establish clear boundaries around areas where human activity becomes dangerous due to supernatural presence, creating buffer zones that protect communities while simultaneously preserving wilderness areas essential for maintaining ecological balance. Her hunting grounds typically encompass regions where normal agricultural and pastoral activities prove difficult or impossible, allowing these areas to serve as refuges for wild animals and plants while discouraging human encroachment that might disrupt natural systems. The ritualistic elements embedded within her consumption practices reveal connections to ancient sacrifice traditions that operated according to principles of cosmic reciprocity and balance maintenance. The preparation of human flesh according to specific protocols, the offering of certain portions to other supernatural entities, and the disposal of inedible remains in ways that return nutrients to the earth all demonstrate understanding of consumption as a sacred act that maintains proper relationships between different categories of being rather than simple predation motivated by hunger or malice. Her discrimination between different types of potential victims reflects sophisticated moral evaluation systems that consider not only immediate actions, but underlying character traits and long-term potential for positive or negative impact on cosmic balance. Children who display exceptional kindness, courage, or wisdom often receive protection or assistance rather than becoming targets for consumption, while those who exhibit cruelty, selfishness, or disrespect for natural forces face immediate danger when they enter her territory. The community responses to her cannibalistic activities reveal the complex relationship between fear and respect that characterized ancient attitudes towards supernatural forces that possessed both beneficial and destructive capabilities. Villages located near her hunting grounds develop elaborate protective rituals and behavioral codes designed to minimize the risk of supernatural predation while maintaining access to the benefits she could provide to worthy supplicants. These protective measures include the construction of shrines and offering sites where communities could attempt to negotiate safe passage or request assistance during times of crisis. The transformation of her cannibalistic aspects through centuries of cultural evolution demonstrates the gradual softening of ancient religious practices as societies developed alternative means of addressing the survival challenges that originally necessitated supernatural intervention. Later versions of her stories often replace actual consumption with threats or symbolic consumption, reflecting changing social values while preserving the essential psychological and behavioral functions served by the original narratives. The persistence of cannibalistic imagery within contemporary Slavic folklore suggests the continued relevance of the primal fears and survival instincts that these stories originally addressed, even in modern contexts where actual supernatural predation no longer represents realistic threats to community welfare. The psychological mechanisms activated by these narratives continue to serve protective functions by encouraging caution in unfamiliar environments and maintaining awareness of potential dangers that might not be immediately apparent through rational analysis. The variations in Baba Yaga's manifestation across the Slavic world reveal a complex tapestry of cultural adaptation that demonstrates both the fundamental universality of her archetypal significance and the remarkable flexibility with which different communities reshaped her character to reflect local beliefs, environmental conditions, and historical experiences. These regional differences extend far beyond simple linguistic variations in her name, encompassing fundamental alterations in her appearance, behavior patterns, dwelling characteristics, and relationship with human communities that illuminate the diverse ways Slavic cultures understood and integrated supernatural forces into their worldview. Russian traditions present Baba Yaga in her most developed and complex form, with narratives that emphasize her role as a powerful, supernatural entity whose influence extends across vast territories and multiple planes of existence. The Russian Baba Yaga typically appears as an ancient crone of enormous size, her skeletal frame supporting a head that barely fits through the doorway of her hut, despite the structure's supernatural dimensions. Her iron teeth gleam with a bluish metallic sheen that reflects the harsh light of northern winters, while her wild grey hair moves with independent life that suggests connection to wind spirits and atmospheric forces. Russian accounts consistently describe her nose as extending far beyond normal human proportions, often reaching her chin or even dangling past it, with nostrils large enough to detect the scent of living humans from distances measured in miles rather than yards. The Russian version of her dwelling demonstrates the most elaborate architectural impossibilities, with the chicken legs described as belonging to enormous roosters whose spurs can gouge furrows in solid stone and whose talons grip the earth with such force that their removal leaves permanent depressions in the landscape. The hut itself appears more substantial in Russian traditions, constructed from logs that show evidence of supernatural preservation despite obvious antiquity, with walls thick enough to muffle the sounds of activity within, while allowing her voice to carry clearly across great distances when she chooses to communicate with the outside world. Her fence of skulls reaches its most elaborate development in Russian folklore, with detailed descriptions of the arrangement patterns that serve specific functions in maintaining the boundary between her domain and the ordinary world. The skulls are organised according to the circumstances of their owners' deaths, with those who died violently facing outward to warn potential intruders, while those who perished from natural causes face inward to provide counsel and guidance to Baba Yaga herself. The eye sockets of these skulls burn with different coloured flames, depending on the phase of the moon and the seasonal cycle, creating a constantly changing display of supernatural illumination that serves both decorative and functional purposes. Ukrainian variations of Baba Yaga demonstrate significant modifications that reflect the region's agricultural emphasis and its historical experience of frequent warfare and population displacement. The Ukrainian Baba Yaga, as she's known in local dialects, appears somewhat less skeletal than her Russian counterpart, with flesh that suggests connection to fertile earth, rather than barren wasteland. Her hair often contains streaks of brown or black among the grey strands, indicating retained connection to the earth's productive capacity, rather than complete association with death and decay. Her iron teeth appear darker in Ukrainian accounts, described as black iron that has been tempered in fires fueled by grain husks and agricultural waste. The Ukrainian version of her hut demonstrates adaptations to the region's relatively flat terrain and extensive agricultural development. The chicken legs appear shorter and more robust, designed for movement across cultivated fields rather than through dense forests, with feet that spread wider to distribute weight across soft soil without leaving deep impressions that might damage crops. The structure itself incorporates elements that suggest familiarity with Ukrainian architectural traditions, including decorative carved elements that mirror patterns found on traditional peasant dwellings, though executed in materials and proportions that mark their supernatural origin. Her relationship with agriculture receives particular emphasis in Ukrainian traditions, with stories describing her ability to blight or bless crops depending on the behaviour of local communities towards supernatural forces and traditional customs. Ukrainian Baba Yaga often appears during harvest time to evaluate the moral character of farming families, rewarding those who maintain proper respect for the earth and its cycles, while punishing those who abuse the land or neglect their obligations to community welfare. Her tests frequently involve agricultural tasks that require knowledge of traditional farming techniques and seasonal timing that connects human activity to cosmic cycles. Polish folklore presents Baba Yaga as a figure whose characteristics reflect the region's position at the crossroads between different cultural influences and its history of contact with Germanic and Celtic traditions. The Polish version appears somewhat more human in proportion than her Eastern counterparts, though retaining the essential supernatural characteristics that mark her as an otherworldly entity. Her clothing shows influences from medieval Polish costume traditions, with garments that appear to be woven from materials that shift between fabric and organic substances, depending on lighting conditions and viewing angles. The Polish Baba Yaga's dwelling demonstrates architectural features that suggest familiarity with medieval fortification techniques, with the hut appearing more like a miniature castle elevated on chicken legs rather than a simple peasant cottage. The structure includes defensive elements such as arrow slits and a drawbridge mechanism that can be raised to prevent unwanted entry, though these features operate according to supernatural rather than mechanical principles. The fence surrounding her property incorporates elements that mirror Polish defensive architecture, with the skulls mounted on posts that resemble the heads displayed on medieval castle walls as warnings to potential enemies. Her interactions with Polish heroes often involve challenges that test knowledge of chivalric codes and noble behaviour patterns that reflect the region's feudal social structure and its emphasis on warrior culture. Polish narratives frequently describe her providing assistance to knights and nobles who demonstrate proper courtesy and respect for supernatural authority, while punishing those who attempt to use force or intimidation to compel her cooperation. Her gifts to successful supplicants often include weapons and armour that incorporate both supernatural properties and decorative elements that reflect Polish metalworking traditions. Czech traditions present Jerzy Baba as a figure whose characteristics demonstrate adaptation to the region's mountainous terrain and its history of mining and metallurgical development. The Czech version appears more closely connected to underground forces and mineral wealth, with clothing and implements that suggest familiarity with mining techniques and metalworking processes. Her iron teeth show evidence of being forged using advanced metallurgical techniques that produce alloys unknown to ordinary smiths, while her other iron implements demonstrate craftsmanship that exceeds normal human capabilities. The Czech Jerzy Baba's dwelling reflects adaptation to mountainous conditions, with the chicken legs described as possessing the climbing ability of mountain goats and the sure footing necessary for traversing steep slopes and rocky terrain. The hut itself incorporates stone elements that suggest connection to the region's mining traditions, with walls that appear to be constructed from blocks of unusual minerals that provide both structural strength and supernatural protection. The interior contains workshops and storage areas that suggest involvement in metallurgical activities that transform raw ores into finished products possessing supernatural properties. Her relationship with Czech heroes often involves challenges that test knowledge of mining techniques, metalworking skills, and understanding of the relationship between underground forces and surface activities. Czech narratives frequently describe her providing assistance to miners and smiths who demonstrate proper respect for the spirits that inhabit mountains and control access to mineral wealth, while punishing those who exploit natural resources without regard for the long-term consequences of their actions. Slovak folklore presents similar adaptations to mountainous conditions while incorporating elements that reflect the region's pastoral traditions and its emphasis on sheep herding and wool production. The Slovak version of Baba Yaga often appears in contexts related to mountain pastures and seasonal migration patterns that connect valley settlements to high-altitude grazing areas. Her clothing incorporates woolen elements that suggest familiarity with textile production techniques, while her challenges often involve tasks related to animal husbandry and the management of livestock in challenging mountain environments. Bulgarian and Serbian variations demonstrate adaptations to the distinct historical experiences and cultural influences that shaped the southern Slavic regions. The Bulgarian Baba Yaga incorporates elements that reflect the region's Byzantine heritage and its exposure to Mediterranean cultural influences, with clothing and architectural elements that suggest familiarity with more sophisticated urban traditions, while retaining essential supernatural characteristics. Her dwelling often incorporates stone construction techniques that reflect regional building traditions, while her challenges frequently involve tests of knowledge related to trade, commerce, and interaction with diverse cultural groups. Serbian traditions present Baba Yaga as a figure whose characteristics reflect the region's history of warfare and resistance to foreign occupation. The Serbian version often appears as a more militant figure whose supernatural powers serve protective functions for communities threatened by external enemies. Her dwelling incorporates defensive features that suggest familiarity with fortress construction, while her gifts to worthy heroes often include weapons and protective items that enhance their ability to defend their communities against supernatural and human threats. The related figure of Baba Yaga appears throughout southern Slavic traditions as a variant that demonstrates regional adaptation while maintaining essential functional similarities to Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga typically appears less skeletal and more robust than her northern counterparts, with physical characteristics that suggest connection to fertile agricultural regions rather than harsh wilderness environments. Her dwelling often appears more integrated into human settlements, with the supernatural elements less pronounced, though still clearly present to those who possess the knowledge necessary for recognizing otherworldly manifestations. The geographic factors that influence these regional variations include climate conditions that shape survival challenges, terrain features that determine transportation and communication patterns, and resource availability that influenced economic activities and social organization. Northern regions with harsh winters and extensive forests produced versions of Baba Yaga that emphasized her connection to survival challenges and her role as gatekeeper between the world of the living and the realm of death. Southern regions with milder climates and more fertile agricultural conditions developed versions that focused more heavily on her relationship with fertility cycles and her function as protector of community welfare. Historical factors that contributed to regional variations include the timing and nature of Christianization processes, exposure to different cultural influences through trade and migration, and the specific types of external threats that different communities faced throughout their development. Regions that experienced gradual Christianization retained more elaborate supernatural traditions, while areas that underwent rapid religious conversion developed simplified versions that could coexist with Christian beliefs without creating direct theological conflicts. The linguistic variations in her name across different Slavic regions reveal the phonetic evolution that occurred as her stories spread through oral transmission across diverse dialectical groups. The Russian Baba Yaga preserves what appears to be the most archaic form, while variations like the Ukrainian Baba Yaga, Polish Baba Yaga, Czech Jezebaba, and Southern Slavic Baba Yaga demonstrate the systematic sound changes that characterize the evolution of Slavic languages from their common Proto-Slavic ancestor. The functional similarities that persist across all regional variations, despite significant differences in appearance and behavior patterns, demonstrate the fundamental universality of the psychological and social needs that Baba Yaga stories address. Her role as threshold guardian, moral evaluator, and source of supernatural assistance appears in all regional variants, though the specific mechanisms through which these functions operate show considerable adaptation to local conditions and cultural values. The preservation of core mythological elements across such diverse regional adaptations suggests that Baba Yaga represents archetypal patterns that transcend specific cultural boundaries while remaining flexible enough to incorporate local variations that enhance their relevance and effectiveness within particular communities. Her continued presence throughout the Slavic world demonstrates the remarkable resilience of oral tradition and its ability to maintain essential symbolic content while adapting surface characteristics to meet changing cultural needs and environmental conditions. The transformation of Baba Yaga throughout centuries of Slavic storytelling reveals a remarkable process of mythological adaptation that preserved her essential supernatural functions while allowing her character to evolve in response to changing social conditions and cultural needs. This evolution demonstrates the sophisticated mechanisms through which oral traditions maintain relevance across multiple generations, adapting surface characteristics while preserving the underlying archetypal patterns that address fundamental human psychological and spiritual requirements. Her earliest manifestations as a death goddess and earth mother figure gradually incorporated elements that reflected the changing relationship between Slavic communities and their natural environment. As agricultural techniques became more sophisticated and settlements grew larger and more permanent, Baba Yaga's role shifted from direct involvement in fertility cycles to oversight of the moral and spiritual development that enabled communities to maintain proper relationship with natural forces. Her cannibalistic aspects became less literal and more symbolic, representing the transformative consumption of outdated attitudes and behaviours rather than actual physical predation. The integration of Christian elements into Slavic culture created particular challenges for the preservation of Baba Yaga's mythological significance, as her pagan origins and supernatural characteristics conflicted directly with monotheistic religious doctrine. Rather than disappearing entirely, her character underwent systematic modification that allowed her to exist within a Christian worldview, as a figure who tested faith and moral character rather than challenging divine authority. Her iron teeth became symbols of the trials that strengthened spiritual resolve, while her impossible tasks represented the difficulties that believers must overcome to achieve salvation. The process of Christianization also influenced the moral framework within which her actions were interpreted, with her assistance to worthy supplicants reframed as divine providence, working through supernatural intermediaries, and her punishment of the unworthy understood as cosmic justice, administered according to Christian principles of moral evaluation. This reinterpretation allowed her stories to continue serving educational and behavioural modification functions while avoiding direct conflict with religious authorities who might otherwise have suppressed pagan traditions entirely. Her influence on other supernatural figures within Slavic folklore demonstrates the central position she occupied within the broader mythological system that governed relationships between human communities and otherworldly forces. The Rusalka, spirits of drowned women who haunted bodies of water, adopted many of her characteristics, including the ability to test the moral character of those who encountered them, and the practice of providing assistance or punishment based on the worthiness of their supplicants. The transformation of these water spirits from simple vengeful ghosts into complex moral evaluators reflects the systematic influence of Baba Yaga's mythological framework on other categories of supernatural beings. Forest spirits like the Leshy incorporated her testing mechanisms and her role as guardian of natural boundaries, developing elaborate challenge systems that required visitors to demonstrate proper respect for wilderness areas and their inhabitants. The Leshy's ability to lead travellers astray or guide them safely through dangerous terrain mirrors Baba Yaga's function as both obstacle and aid, while the moral criteria used to determine which response visitors receive shows clear derivation from her character development patterns. Household spirits such as the Domovoi adopted her emphasis on practical competence and moral behaviour as prerequisites for supernatural assistance, creating domestic testing scenarios that paralleled her impossible tasks while operating on a smaller scale appropriate to family rather than community contexts. The Domovoi's evaluation of household members based on their work ethic, treatment of family members, and respect for traditional customs demonstrates the systematic influence of Baba Yaga's moral framework on supernatural entities whose primary functions involve protection rather than testing. The recurring themes and motifs associated with Baba Yaga across centuries of storytelling reveal the persistent psychological and social concerns that her narratives address. The threshold crossing motif appears consistently throughout her stories, representing not only physical movement between locations, but symbolic transition between different states of consciousness and capability. Her dwelling's position at the boundary between forest and clearing, her role as gatekeeper between worlds, and her function as facilitator of transformation all emphasize the importance of properly managed transitions in both individual development and community evolution. The testing motif demonstrates the ancient understanding that genuine capability and wisdom can only be developed through exposure to challenges that require the full deployment of available resources and the discovery of previously unknown potential. Her impossible tasks force supplicants to transcend normal limitations through creative problem-solving, moral courage, and willingness to seek assistance from unexpected sources, creating opportunities for personal growth that would not arise through easier paths to desired goals. The reciprocity motif emphasizes the cosmic principle that supernatural assistance must be earned through demonstration of worthy character and genuine need, rather than demanded as a right or obtained through deception or coercion. Her gifts come with corresponding responsibilities that ensure their use serves broader community welfare rather than individual aggrandizement, while her punishments typically provide opportunities for moral development through direct experience of the consequences that flow from particular character defects. The transformation motif reflects the fundamental Slavic understanding that genuine change requires the death of old patterns and the birth of new capabilities, with Baba Yaga serving as midwife for these psychological and spiritual transitions. Her consumption of the unworthy represents the elimination of outdated attitudes and behaviours, while her assistance to successful supplicants enables the manifestation of enhanced capabilities that serve both individual fulfillment and community benefit. Her role as preserver of ancient wisdom becomes particularly significant when viewed against the backdrop of rapid cultural change that characterized much of Slavic history. Successive waves of migration, conquest, religious conversion, and technological development created constant pressure for communities to abandon traditional practices and adopt new ways of life that often proved inadequately adapted to local conditions and cultural needs. Baba Yaga's stories served as repositories for practical knowledge, moral principles, and spiritual insights that might otherwise have been lost during periods of cultural disruption. The agricultural wisdom embedded in her narratives preserved knowledge of seasonal timing, crop rotation techniques, and sustainable farming practices that enabled communities to maintain productivity despite changing political and social conditions. Her emphasis on proper relationship with natural forces provided guidance for environmental management that prevented the resource depletion and ecological damage that often accompanied rapid cultural change and population growth. The domestic skills tested through her impossible tasks maintained knowledge of traditional crafts, food preparation techniques, and household management practices that proved essential for community survival during periods when external support systems became unreliable. Her challenges ensured that these practical capabilities were transmitted to new generations, along with the moral principles necessary for their responsible application. The spiritual insights preserved through her character development patterns provided frameworks for understanding the relationship between individual consciousness and cosmic forces that enabled communities to maintain psychological stability and cultural coherence despite external pressures that might otherwise have led to social fragmentation and cultural collapse. Her representation of primal feminine power within traditional societies reflects the ancient recognition that female wisdom and capability encompassed domains that extended far beyond domestic responsibilities to include mastery of supernatural forces and cosmic principles. Her iron teeth symbolized the transformative power that could reshape reality according to spiritual principles, while her dwelling's impossible architecture demonstrated the ability to transcend normal physical limitations through superior understanding of natural laws. The respect and fear that her character inspired served protective functions that ensured the preservation of feminine authority within cultural contexts that might otherwise have marginalized women's contributions to community welfare and spiritual development. Her stories provided models for female power that operated independently of male authority, while serving essential functions that benefited entire communities rather than challenging established social hierarchies through direct confrontation. Her role as moral evaluator established feminine wisdom as the ultimate standard for judging character and worthiness, creating cultural frameworks that recognized women's superior insight into the psychological and spiritual factors that determined individual and community success. This recognition provided protection for women who possessed unusual capabilities or knowledge that might otherwise have made them targets for persecution or elimination. The educational functions of her narratives ensured that feminine wisdom traditions were transmitted to new generations through storytelling practices that made complex spiritual and practical knowledge accessible to children and adults regardless of their formal educational background. Her stories served as comprehensive curriculum that addressed moral development, practical skills, and spiritual understanding while maintaining the entertainment value necessary for effective oral transmission. The preservation of Baba Yaga's essential characteristics through centuries of cultural transformation demonstrates the remarkable resilience of archetypal patterns that address fundamental human needs and concerns. Her continued presence in contemporary folklore, literature, and popular culture reflects the ongoing relevance of the psychological and spiritual functions she serves, even in modern contexts where the specific survival challenges that originally shaped her character no longer represent immediate threats to community welfare. Her evolution from ancient earth goddess to folkloric figure to contemporary cultural icon illustrates the dynamic processes through which mythological traditions adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining their essential symbolic content and functional effectiveness. The flexibility that has enabled her survival across such diverse historical periods and cultural contexts suggests that her archetypal significance transcends the specific conditions of any particular era, addressing aspects of human experience that remain constant despite technological advancement and social evolution. The global recognition that Baba Yaga has achieved in recent decades, extending far beyond the Slavic communities where her stories originated, demonstrates the universal applicability of the wisdom traditions she represents. Her appearance in international literature, film, and other media reflects the growing recognition that traditional folklore contains insights into human psychology and spiritual development that remain relevant regardless of cultural background or technological sophistication. As the last guardian of ancient Slavic wisdom traditions, Baba Yaga continues to serve as a bridge between prehistoric understanding of supernatural forces and contemporary recognition of the psychological and spiritual dimensions of human experience. Her iron teeth still gleam with the transformative power that can reshape individual consciousness and community relationships, while her impossible dwelling remains accessible to those who possess the courage and wisdom necessary for crossing the threshold between ordinary awareness and the expanded perception that enables genuine understanding of life's deeper mysteries. Through her preservation of the ancient ways within the framework of evolving cultural expression, she ensures that the essential insights of our ancestors remain available to guide future generations in their ongoing quest for meaning, purpose, and authentic connection to the forces that govern both individual destiny and collective survival.